Sarah, and oh, here we go. And I'm Sarah, and as Mickey said, welcome to SciComm's kickoff event for Research Communication Week. Today I'll be talking about how to present research, and I'll start off by talking about the content of your research presentation, and then move on to the specifics of presenting on Zoom and things to keep in mind. If anyone has any questions during the presentation, feel free to interrupt at any time and ask them, or you can put them in the chat and I'll answer them at the end. All right. So the first question we should ask is why are research presentations important? So does anyone have any answers? Any thoughts about that? All right, it's fine if not. Hopefully we can answer that at the end of the presentation. But several answers to this question. No answer is really the correct one. It's kind of dependent upon you and what you want to get out of your research presentation. So they can range from just simply sharing your research with other people or helping you actually get funding for your research. So they're quite important in any academic field that you will be in. So when talking about the content of academic presenting, it's important to consider the 5 C's, which are clarity, conciseness, cohesion, coherence, and conviction. And throughout the presentation, we'll kind of go into detail into each of these categories, and we'll have examples and some specifics about what you should do and what you should not do for each category. So starting with clarity. Clarity is important when presenting as it helps the audience that comes from different research backgrounds to understand the material you're presenting by kind of implementing straightforward points in your presentation. So there's a couple of things that you want to keep in mind when considering clarity for presenting. You want to avoid verb separation, avoid long clauses, avoid strings of nouns, use word choice that is unambiguous, and define all the abbreviations that you use, which is especially important in fields like biology when you're talking about proteins or genes that have quite long names. So the example we have here, we can see that it says, this observation coupled with additional tests of penicillin-induced bacterial killing, as well as purification and synthesis of the active agent, led to the mass production and distribution of penicillin in 1945. So the sentence doesn't really have the best level of clarity as we can see here. There is subject-verb separation with the subject, the observation, and led being separated by the long clause in the middle. There's also a long string of nouns here, which is penicillin-induced bacterial killing, which decreases the transparency of the message as well. So when presenting, it's important to avoid making these mistakes in clarity. So the second C for academic presenting that I'll be talking about is going to be conciseness, which is achieved by using the fewest words possible to express an idea clearly. So to make sure that what you're saying is concise, it's important to follow these 2 points. Remove unnecessary words or phrases and replace the phrases with a single word when possible. So with the example we have here, it says, all my research thus far has been directed towards this endeavor of understanding post-transcriptional regulation of gene expression, the context of animal development. So the sentence can be revised by removing a couple of phrases to make it more concise. Instead of starting off with all of my research, we can directly go to my research, remove thus far, and remove this endeavor of. This makes the final revised sentence, my research has been directed towards understanding post-transcriptional regulation of gene expression in the context of animal development, which is a lot more concise than the original sentence. So the third C of academic presenting will be cohesion. So this is going to involve the flow of sentences and paragraphs from one to another. So a couple of things to keep in mind when trying to achieve cohesion in your presentation is to connect sentences and paragraphs with transitions. A few questions that you want to keep in mind is while rehearsing your presentation, you want to ask, does your paragraphs flow with one another? And does it make sense at a sentence level? So we can practice cohesion by looking at this example here. I won't read this one out loud because it's a little bit long, but I'll give everyone a few seconds to read it yourself. All right, so after reading it, hopefully we can tell that the cohesion or the overall flow of the paragraph could be improved. So we have the revised paragraph here, which includes several transition words. We have, however, between the first two sentences, pertinent to the study between the second and third sentence, and the last sentence, which includes the phrase, to further establish that GLP-T does not contribute to phosphamidomycin uptake under this condition. And this sentence is especially effective because it kind of summarizes and adds cohesion to the paragraph. So the fourth C of academic presenting is coherence, which is similar to cohesion, but it focuses on the ideas that are presented in the research, which is logical and consistent with one another. So with coherence, it's important to ask the question, does it make sense on the idea level? Or in other words, do your ideas get across in your presentation? The example on the screen reads, the hotel is famous. It is one of the most well-known hotels in the country. The latest international dancing competition was held at the hotel. The hotel spent a lot of money to advertise the event. Because the hotel wanted to gain international reputation, but not many people attended the event. So there are a few problems with this example as the phrases are quite short and don't quite make sense together. To fix this, we can revise the sentence into the latest international dancing competition was held at the hotel, which is one of the most well-known hotels in this region. The hotel spent a lot of money on advertising the event since it wanted to enhance its international reputation. However, it failed to attract many people. This revised sentence is much more logical and coherent to get the ideas across. All right. The fifth and final C of academic presenting is conviction, which is the ability to convince the audience to believe and trust what is being said. So to have strong conviction when presenting, it's important to use active tense. For example, instead of saying frogs were studied, you can say we studied frogs, which is much more effective. It's okay to have some passive tense, but we tend to want to overuse it when presenting research. So try to make an effort to use mostly active tense. Along the same vein, don't be afraid of personal expressions like we, which have the ability to bring a stronger conviction to your presentation. Additionally, be cautious with word choice and try to avoid weak words and phrases like appears, seems, instead, and instead use words like shows, illustrates, demonstrates, and supports. So for the example sentence on the screen, it is phosphamidomycin activity was compared in delta GLP-T in parent E. coli strains. The sentence can be revised by saying, we compared phosphamidomycin activity in delta GLP-T versus parent E. coli strains, which has a much stronger and effective conviction. All right, and some additional tips to keep in mind when to use specific tenses throughout your research presentation. So the materials and methods section often uses past tense, while the abstract, introduction, results, and discussion section uses present tense. The conclusion can be a mix of present and future tense, with future being used to only describe future experiments. The important tip here is, however, is to rehearse multiple times. So when presenting, ask yourself the following questions. Is this slide necessary? Is it getting your point or ideas across? If it isn't, it might be better to leave it out rather than confuse the audience with information they don't need to know. Also, it's important to reach out to PIs or mentors or even friends to help in the rehearsal process. You can also help others for practice because it's always kind of easier to find flaws when it's not even your own work. All right. So we just have a few examples here that test on all the 5 C's of academic presenting that we just covered. So this is the first example. I'll let everyone read it for a couple of about 15 seconds. All right. Does anyone have anything to say to anything that they might want to fix in this example? All right, it's fine if not. I can go ahead and show you what I found. So some of the things that stand out is the phrase in dark blue, which has like a potential redundancy. So it affects the conciseness of the paragraph and also affects the flow. To fix the coherence, we can add the phrase to the beginning of the paragraph and make it a separate background sentence. So we can see in the revised example, I would just move the blue part into kind of a background sentence. Additionally, absolutely, which is outlined in red, is not required for the message to say the same, so it can be removed. And the underlined part of the paragraph can also be reworded to give a stronger conviction. So the final revised sentence would be this. I'll give everyone a few seconds to read it. So it's a lot better, I think, than the first an original example. And then the next two final examples are going to focus on conciseness. All right, and I'll give everyone a couple of seconds to read this example. All right, and does anyone have any ideas of trying to make this paragraph a little bit shorter, more concise? All right, that's fine. Oh, Moira, if you have.
Yeah, I was going to say at the beginning, I feel like it's kind of hard to avoid the passive tense, but, or not, yeah, saying it passively. But we can just eliminate some words. So it has been questioned whether host proteins are important.
Right. Yeah, that'd be a great idea. So the way that, we chose to do it is actually to just rephrase it into a question. So are host proteins important for the function of PICs? And then below I review proposals derived from in vitro studies of PICs, purified integrase, purified target DNA binding proteins, which is about 30 words shorter than the original sentence and a lot more concise. So the next example is a lot shorter, so you guys can read that. A wide variety of factors influence the success of treatment of multiple human cancers. So does anyone have any ideas about how to make this a little bit more concise?
Human cancers can be influenced by a wide variety of factors.
Yeah, that's great. So the one that I have here is the success of cancer therapy is affected by multiple factors, which is, I think, the one that you offered, and any concise version of it would work. So it's great. And also a thing to keep in mind is a phrase is like a wide variety of factors can usually be replaced by reorganizing the sentence a little bit. All right, so moving on to the second half of the presentation, I'll be talking about things to consider specifically when doing research presentations over Zoom. So the first few things you want to keep in mind is what the webcam shows in terms of background, lighting, and eye contact. So make sure to have a plain background that doesn't really distract away from your presentation, and have good lighting so the audience can see you presenting. While presenting, also make sure to make eye contact and look at the webcam often to keep that engagement with your audience. The second thing to keep in mind is to minimize the amount of noise and distractions that you might have while presenting. So this could include telling people not to bother you or locking your room to block a pet out. Try to turn off your phone and computer notifications to limit the amount of noise that comes from there as well. Additionally, at the beginning of the presentation, tell the audience kind of what is expected of them, encourage them to participate or ask to hold questions until the end. With Zoom, you can ask the audience to ask questions in the chat or raise their hand too. So whatever works best for you is kind of ideal. So the visuals and design are also quite important in research presentations, both in person and Zoom, as it kind of keeps your audience's attention. So try to use pictures instead of words whenever possible, since having a lot of words on a screen kind of leads to the audience kind of being disengaged from the presentation. Whenever you do have words on the screen, however, they should be minimal and they should be in a large, bold font. Any graphs and data included should also be high resolution. This is especially important because you don't want the audience to have to lean in or squint to understand what ideas you want to convey in your research presentation. They could also be viewing the presentation on their phone, which makes text and details appear even smaller, which is important to consider when creating your slides. The final and maybe most important tip would be to have a backup plan. With everything being on Zoom, you never know when technology might crash. So make sure that you have supplemental slides if necessary. Make sure that you have a solid and stable internet connection. And if it gets flaky, try turning off your video and see if that helps quite a bit. And have your computer charger plugged in or nearby. So that concludes our how to present research presentation. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat and I'll be happy to answer them now. Before anyone leaves, however, we want to remind everyone of 2 more events that we'll be hosting this week as part of SciComm's Research Communication Week. On Friday at 7 p.m., we will have a brown bag research exchange, which includes 6 undergraduate discussions, 6 undergraduate students talking about the research in a seminar format. They'll be moderated, so feel free to stop by and listen in on the discussion that is going to happen there. And additionally, we'll have our first undergraduate oral presentation event from 1 to 6 p.m. on Saturday, where undergraduates will be given 15 minutes presentations about the research with a Q&A session. So feel free to stop by and listen in on the research that we'll be talking about. And I want to thank everyone for coming. All right, I think I see some questions in the chat, or is it just? All right, never mind.
Thank you everyone for coming. We did put a short feedback form in the chat. If you could take a couple seconds to fill that out, we would really appreciate it, as we are a relatively young club and we want to make sure that these events are as useful to you as we can possibly make them be. So if you could give us a little bit of feedback through that form, it would be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, have a great night, and we look forward to seeing you at the other events that we have planned for Research Communication Week. So thank you again. If you have any questions, feel free to hang out and we can address them.
Yeah.